chapter number 5. Gospel recorded by St. Mark, chapter number 5. Last week we hung out in that area and talked about the woman, issue of blood, and talked about what's your issue. Today I want to hang back in that same area. I want to look at the miracle of Jairus' daughter. Mark chapter 5, verse 21. Listen at the word of the Lord. It says that when Jesus was passed over, again by ship unto the other side, much people gathered unto him, and he was near unto the sea. And behold, there cometh one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and when he saw him, he fell at his feet. He besought him greatly, saying, My little daughter lieth at the point of death. I pray thee, I beg thee, come and lay thy hands on her, that she may be healed. She shall live, and she shall live. And Jesus went with him. Much people followed him and thronged him. A certain woman, now in the midst of that crowd, which had an issue of blood 12 years. Skip down to verse 35. It says, while he yet spake, there came from the ruler of the synagogue's house certain which said, Thy daughter is dead. Why troublest thou the master any further? Don't bother him. She's already dead. And as soon as Jesus heard the word that was spoken, he looked over at Jairus and said unto the ruler of the synagogue, Be not afraid. Only believe. Somebody say, only believe.
Only believe.
And he suffered no man. He allowed no man to follow him, save except Peter and James and John, the brother of James. And he cometh to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and he saw the tumult, and them that wept and wailed greatly. And when he come in, he said unto them, Why make ye this ado and weep? What's all the noise and crying? He said, The damsel is not dead, but sleep. And they laughed at him to scorn. And when he had put them all out, so y'all got to go. He taketh the father and the mother of the damsel, and them that were with him, and entered into where she was laying. And he took the damsel by the hand, and said unto her, Talitha cumi, which is interpreted, Damsel, I say unto thee, arise. Straightway she arose and walked. And she was of the age of 12 years. And they were astonished with great astonishment. And he charged them straitly that no man should know it, and commanded that something should be given to her to eat. In verse 36, again, Bible says, as soon as he heard the word that was spoken, looked over at Jairus and said, Be not afraid, only believe. And that's what I want to talk about today. Look at your neighbor and say, Neighbor, whatever you do, only believe. Yeah, just only believe, only believe. That's all we have is our faith of what we believe. My brothers and sisters, look at Mark chapter number 5. 3 great miracles comprise the contents of this chapter. And really, if we would go back to chapter 4 and add the last paragraph of that chapter, there we'll discover that there are 4 consecutive miracles recorded by Mark, which illustrate the 4 categories of miracles that Christ performed in his earthly ministry. They are, first of all, in Mark chapter 4, we'll discover the latter part. The first miracle is the ruling of nature. You remember when they were on the sea and there was a great storm, and he looked at the storm and says, "Peace, be still." The second miracle was the removing of demons in Mark chapter 5, verse 1, when the man who would often go in the graveyard at night, he would live there up and down, run up and down the hills, cutting himself. We discover that's the second one. But then the third one is the restoring of health, of what we looked at last week, of the woman with the issue of blood. And then now it's the fourth miracle, is the raising of the dead that we discovered this morning here, that he raises Jairus' daughter from the dead. And these miracles that we're going to discover certainly demonstrate the divine power and the character of Jesus. And when we look at this Mark chapter 5 this morning, we discover here that now we've been following him in these other miracles, and we notice that Jesus goes from one hopeless situation to another. Because all of the situations, if you look at them, they look hopeless. We witness him demonstrate his power again over the stormy sea. We've witnessed him demonstrate his power over a demon-possessed man, and then that very sick woman who had the issue of blood. And he's proven time and time again that he's more than adequate to heal in any situation. Now, Jesus, we discover, he spoke, and when he did so, back in chapter 4, of the latter part of chapter 4, when he spoke, the raging storm had to get in order. When he spoke to the man that was dealing with the demon possession, immediately the demons jumped out of him. And at his command, watch this now, the power healed the woman that had that terminal illness. And these 3 episodes, my brothers and sisters, prove to us that Jesus is the master of hopeless situations. And that's what I shared with you last week, because even though her situation, as I shared with you, was horrific and horrendous, this woman had hope in Jesus, and because she had hope, she was healed. And I come to tell you today that God specializes in hopeless situations. This morning, when we look at this particular text, here it is, another hopeless situation. This time, he faces the greatest enemy that's known to man. Jesus faces death in these verses, but yet he walks away with victory. That's good news to know today. And as we watch the Lord conquer another hopeless situation, this time, watch this, we discover watch this, it gives us hope when our own desperate times come like these. Because watch this, even though this woman dies, we got some things in our lives that die as well. And it lets us know in the midst of this text, Keith, that if Jesus can raise this woman, he can raise our hopeless and dead situations. And I don't know who I came to preach to today, but somebody's got some stuff that has died in your life. Maybe your finances have died. Maybe your spiritual life has died. Maybe your relationship is dying. But I come to tell you today, touch your neighbor and say, keep hope alive. Yeah, keep hope alive. And as we look, I want you to see this Father today, because as we watch our Lord conquer this hopeless situation, I want you to look at this text today. In verse 36 again, he says to him, be not afraid, but do what? Only believe. Touch somebody and say, only believe. Only believe. And I want us, like this Father today, to have that kind of faith. But I want us to look at this father's faith in action. This father, there's so much we can learn from this man, Jairus, today. If I had to give a subtitle for this sermon, I would call it The Faith of Jairus. The faith of Jairus, because Jairus had some super faith, and we'll see that his faith, watch this, is matured by the struggle that he endures. His faith is matured, and sometimes we don't understand the struggles that we go through, but sometimes God allows us to go through some struggles because he's trying to mature our faith. Yeah, sometimes God allows us to go through some things, and he allows, watch this, stuff to be hard pushing in your life. Sometimes God allows stuff to be real hard, just like, when you're in the weight room pushing and there's a lot of weight, because he's trying to mature and bring out the best of your faith. See, you ought not want everything easy in life, because when you get it easy, it don't take a lot of faith. You shouldn't want everything just given to you and handed to you, but you ought to have some stuff you want to work for and pray for and say, Lord, I know I prayed for that thing. But listen, my faith was put to work. When we look at this text, watch this, the Father. I like this because I want to see the Father's faith, and we learn so much. The first thing we look at in this Father's faith, we see, watch this, the conception of his faith. Somebody say the conception of his faith. Watch it now with the conception, because everybody's faith has to start somewhere. Yeah. Jesus now, notice now, verse 21, has just returned from a night at the sea. Him and his disciples went to the other side of the lake, and while he was there, Jesus delivered a poor man, watch this, from the grip of Satan by casting out the demons that had possessed him. But now, Jesus has returned to Capernaum. And he's immediately met, the Bible says, verse 21, 22, he's met by a crowd of people. And some have gathered to hear his words. Some have come in the hopes of experiencing a miracle. But all of them are there to see Jesus. And a man named Jairus rushes into the crowd surrounding Jesus. And it is his story that serves as the focus of these verses. He's a man whose little faith is about to grow very large. Now watch the conception of his faith. The first thing we got to see is the direction of his faith, because watch it, this man is a ruler of a synagogue. You got to know what that means. He's the ruler of the synagogue, which means that he was the one of the officials who oversaw the business of the synagogue. He was not a preacher. He wasn't a preacher, but he had a large part in the worship service. In other words, he was responsible for making sure that everything was in order. Yeah, he would have been an important man in our community today. Jairus possessed power, he possessed privileges, he had prestige, he had position, he had prominence. He would have been a wealthy man with a fine home and a whole bunch of servants. He was a religious man who faithfully practiced the Jewish faith. Now, at this moment in his life, none of those things mattered. At this moment in his life, listen, see, because you got to understand, sickness and death has visited the home of Jairus, and none of that stuff mattered in his life anymore. His power, his money, his position, his religion, listen, none of that stuff mattered. He says, my daughter, matter of fact, my little daughter is at the point of death. And he says, I need some help. This broken-hearted father knows that he needs help. And he's heard about Jesus. And he runs to him and he humbles himself at the feet of Jesus. Now let me be real with you. This had to be real hard for Jairus, because he's the ruler of the synagogue. all of his colleagues in the ministry disapprove of Jesus. Yeah. And most of the synagogues had been closed, so Jesus wasn't allowed to come in with his ministry. Yet this father is desperate. And he turns to the man named Jesus for help. And let me say this, fear of death and love for his daughter and a sense of utter helplessness drove him to Jesus. And I come to tell you, there's some stuff that'll drive you to Jesus. There's some stuff that'll make you go to church. There's some stuff that'll make you get to this altar. There's some stuff, listen, I hear people all the time, ain't no God, ain't no church. Listen, I don't say, listen, there's some stuff that will make you get and say, Lord, I need you. Jairus doesn't understand everything there is to know about Jesus. But he's come to believe that this man can heal his daughter. And I want to remind you something, that tragedy doesn't care who you are. The trials of life are not going to pass you by. Job said it real clearly in Job chapter 14. Man born of a woman is of a few days, and those days are full of trouble. Jesus says in John 16, in this world, I don't know about no other world, but in this world, you're going to have some tribulation. But be of good cheer. Don't let it keep you down. Because I've already overcome the world. So tragedy doesn't care that you go to church. Tragedy don't care that you pay your tithes. Sickness and death could care less about your achievements and your assets. And when the trials of life come, you need a resource outside of yourself. I know you got your degree. I know you got a good job. You making some good money. But when tragedy comes, all the degrees on the wall don't mean nothing. All the money in the world don't mean nothing. All the prestige and power and prominence that you have does not mean anything. Because when death, sickness, sorrow, marital trouble, financial trouble comes, you need more than some religion or some stuff of this world. You need a faith that rests in Jesus and his power alone. And the question is, what do you really trust today? Do you trust Jesus? Do you trust just your religion? Do you trust your money? Do you trust your job? Listen, we look at this man, Jairus, a ruler of a synagogue. And the first thing we see is the conception of his faith. This is where his faith began. And I wonder, can some of us remember the conception of our faith? What did it take to make you trust Jesus? What did it take to make you say, oh yeah, I believe? What did it take to make you say, Lord, I need you in my life? Can you remember the conception of your faith? So when we look at this conception of his faith, the first thing we see is the direction of his faith. But then we see the depth of his faith, the depth of his faith. Because watch this, Jairus has heard what Jesus can do just by touching someone who's diseased. He heard about the woman who said, let me just touch the hem of your garment. And surely he's already heard the stories about the amazing power of the Lord's touch. And he might have even been in the synagogue or by the seashore when Jesus reached out and touched some pitiful creature or healed their disease. But regardless of whether he heard about it or whether he saw it with his own eyes, watch this, Jairus believes that Jesus can do this for his own daughter. And he believes the Lord's touch will bring healing to his child. And this powerful man humbles himself at the feet of Jesus. And this is the kind of faith the Lord is looking for in your life and in my life. He wants us to come to the end of our own abilities, and he wants us to come to a place where we know that we can't, but he can. Tell your neighbor, say, even when you can't, he can. Yeah. See, like Jesus, watch it, like Jairus, there will be many times when our faith is small and when it's weak. But like Jairus, our faith must be in the Lord and in his ability. See, faith in Jesus is faith that will always be honored by God. See, because God honors faith and faith honors God. Why do you think he said in Mark chapter 9, verse 23, he says, listen, if thou can believe, all things are possible. But you got to first do what? Believe. John chapter 4, John chapter 14, watch what Jesus said. He says this, he says, and whatsoever you shall ask in my name, that will I do, that the Father might be glorified. If you shall ask anything in my name, I will do it. But you got to have faith enough to ask it in his name, believing that it's done. See, half your battle is believing. Right. Sometimes we don't get the breakthrough because we don't believe in the breakthrough. Sometimes we don't get the healing because we don't believe that we heal. See, your healing, watch this, is not always physical, but it starts in the mindset. It's a spiritual healing first. You got to know within yourself that I'm healed, and then you can walk in it. You can't walk in something you don't believe. I can't get it if I don't believe it. You got to believe it in order to achieve it. We tell our children all the time, first of all, before you can achieve it, you got to believe that you can get it. Because your achievement starts with your believing. That's why the songwriter R. Kelly, I think, said, I believe I can fly. Before I can fly, I first of all got to believe I can do it. Because if I don't believe it, I ain't even going to be able to achieve it. So it's the same thing with our faith in God. You got to believe. So first of all, we see the conception of his faith. But then when we look at Jairus, we see not only the conception of his faith, but then we see the confusion now of his faith. Because some stuff has now messed him up. Watch what happened. Here he is now. He said, Lord, he comes to him, verse 23. He besought him greatly, saying, my little daughter is lying at the point of death. Lord, I beg you that you will come, lay your hands that she might live. Watch this. And Jesus, watch verse 24. And Jesus did what? He went with him, and a whole lot of people started following him. And then here's this woman. Lord have mercy. You going to my house to deal with my daughter. And now this woman interrupts us. I got a problem with that. Here comes the confusion. Now somebody said once that a faith that can't be tested is a faith that can't be trusted. And here we see the faith of Jairus put to test. Because a hopeless situation grew worse with each passing moment. Now we're going to notice, but here's the confusion. The confusion. First of all, he's confused by the hindering situations. Because something has hindered his faith. Because here he is, Jesus leaves to go with him to heal his daughter. And as he goes, he's thrown by the crowd and a very sick woman. And Jesus stops. He going with me to my house. And now you're going to stop to confront and comfort this woman. And while you're doing that, minutes are passing by. Jesus, she's about to die. This is a 911 call, man. My daughter is dying. And you stop it. Can you imagine now? Come on, Jay, let's go. And you talk about thousands of people. And here goes this woman. Talking about if I can just touch. Be careful, fellas. But listen, here it is. He's on his way, man. Now, I would imagine that Jairus is confused and he's upset by the delay. Because after all, his daughter is in a dying process. She don't have much time. Jesus is wasting his time on this woman. And it's very possible that Jairus knew this woman and her condition. If so, he knows that she's been sick for 12 years. Now, he may be thinking that waiting another hour for her healing wouldn't have killed her. You know, you don't wait 12 years. A couple more hours while he go to my house. You know, come on now. That's his thinking process, probably. And he may be thinking that this interruption would kill his daughter. We don't know what was going on in his mind of Jairus, but he's probably waiting impatiently. His stomach is in knots. You got to see him now. And if you had ever had a sick child, then you know that anxiety has gripped you. See, you ever had a child that's sick and you just trying to get to the doctor. You running red lights. I don't know y'all ever been there. You running red lights. You running, listen, I'm trying to get my baby to the doctor. So when you've been there, you understand where Jairus is. And on the surface, the Lord's delay seems a little insensitive. He knows the seriousness of the situation. He knows the broken heart of this father. He knows the urgency of the need. But Jesus pauses to take care of the need at hand. And what seems to be hard and harsh on the surface has really an important lesson to teach us. We got to understand that God doesn't run on our schedule. God is not bound by the constraints of time and space. Lord have mercy. It may surprise you, but God does not possess a clock or a calendar. Ooh. We work on times. We work on calendars. But God works when he wants to. Because the text says he never sleeps, nor he slumbers. See, you and I are on certain time clocks. You know, we go to work 8 hours and we want our 8 hours and we done and we sleep at a certain hour. But God said, listen, I don't work. And see, the delays of life are designed to increase our faith. And sometimes God will put your blessing on delay to see where your faith really is. Yeah, I know what you've been asking for. I know what you want. I know what you need. But sometimes God said, I got that thing on delay because I want to see if you still gonna come to church. I want to see if you still gonna pay your tithes. I want to see if you still gonna pray. I want to see if you still come in the ministry meeting. I know what you need from me, but touch your day says it's just a test. See, when God doesn't move as quickly as you might like him, you got to trust him anyway. See, because blessings delayed are not blessings denied. So we see, number one, the conception of his faith. We see the confusion of his faith. What he's confused, number one, by a hindering situation. He's hindered by this crowd. He's hindered by this sick woman. But then, amen, he's confused by a hopeless situation. Because verse 36, we discover as Jesus is finally finishing up with this woman. Watch it now. Some people have come from the home of Jairus with some devastating news. Notice what he said while he yet spake. Somebody came from Jairus' house and said in verse 35, thy daughter is dead. Don't trouble. Why you even, you know, let me tell you what they really said. You don't even need to bring him. She gone, man. Yeah, we getting ready to call the mortuary. Keith had an Uber call. He'll be back. Nah, this thing working. So listen. Tell me I gotta laugh for a minute. Listen, here it is. He's finishing up now, and here's notice the cold way in which they informed this poor father. That's mighty cold to say. There's no compassion, there's no comfort, there's no sympathy. It's nothing but just hard, cold facts. You know, if you're gonna break news to somebody, let me talk to you for a minute. Let's, hey man, ain't no sense come, she gone. That's rather cold, man. Yeah. And surely the news rocked Jairus to his foundations. The news attacked his faith. It had to. Now notice, you got to look at this thing. When he first came to Jesus in verse 21, he's like, Jesus, my daughter, I'm a ruler. I've humbled myself. I've come to you because I heard about you. And I got faith, and I know that you can heal her. Yeah. Watch his faith. Now it's here. But now, his faith has been rocked. He's confused now. Because now you're going with me, and there's some woman who done interrupted my stuff. There's a crowd now who done distracted and hindered my faith. This thing coming down now because I'm excited. And now we almost there. And now we get news from some insensitive people that says she's dead. You got to see his faith. Lord have mercy. Surely it attacked his faith. It brought him to the very edge of despair. See, when you despair, you lose hope. It brought him to a point. Surely he must have thought about the delay. I know he did, like Jesus, man. If we would have got there, it was almost like Lazarus and the sisters. Had you been there, my brother wouldn't have died. And we black folk love to play the blame game. See, if this wouldn't have happened and you wouldn't have been there, So I know already, going through his mind, that hour that you stopped to deal with that woman, you could have healed my daughter. So you got to see the emotional roller coaster going on now. His faith is here. Now it's here. And that's how people get rocked in life, because one moment we're here and then the next moment you're here and you say, Lord, you a healer. And then you take my mama, you take my daughter, you take my son, you took my wife. I see people today who don't even trust God no more because their faith has been rocked. What do you do when your faith has been rocked? Lord have mercy. You done put all these years on your job, and now they done fight. They done gave you a pink slip after 22 years, and you got time invested. Your faith, you say, Lord, you told me you was gonna look out for me. I pay my tithes every Sunday, and now they let me go. What do you do when your faith gets rocked? Somebody that you've been faced with a similar situation when your faith got robbed. That must have been, the same way Mary and Martha felt. When Lazarus fell ill. So Lord, if you would have been there, my brother wouldn't have died. Whew. We can't see what God is doing behind the scenes. But sometimes it appears that he's taking his time when we want him to move swiftly. What would Job have thought if he had seen behind the curtain of eternity? Would it have made his experience easier to bear? It might have and it might not have. But God has no need to explain himself to us. See, because when God doesn't make sense, keep trusting him. He's working in ways you can't see to accomplish what you can't imagine. He's working in ways you can't see to accomplish what you can't imagine. And we need to remember the truth that God is seldom early, but he's never late. And I come to tell somebody today that God has a plan for your situation.